Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Left 4 Dead. So, I've slept since the last recording, so I'm probably gonna do fairly badly. This is something you probably shouldn't say in the first 5 seconds of a YouTube video, but yeah, we had the big encounter at the church, and now there's either 1 or 2 chapters left, and in these 1 or 2 chapters, I think we're accidentally playing on normal, so there is a decent chance of a bit of a warm-up struggle. And of course, that's not really what you would want, but it is something that happens in any single-player game, particularly a game like this that doesn't have a lot of story that's gonna keep your attention or keep you playing.
Reloading.
And see, if you were playing this in multiplayer, you very possibly are going to run into sections that you load into that are in the middle of a scenario, and new players will just drop in and drop out, which means there really can't be any real difficulty curve or anything like that in the gameplay. Everything has to be relatively balanced by the AI director or just in general. I guess we are going to make our way through Riverside, so a bit more of a city environment. I guess theoretically the idea is that we have made it to the other side of a fenced off section that was here before. Like, this was the blocked area. This was the blocked area before that you would have just crossed through here. Of course, we also had a load occur in the middle of that. This is an old enough game that it doesn't have the passive adaptive level loading where it will say, okay, you're away from that part, let's unload that from memory, and let's now load in what's the next section that they're pointing to. Particularly since this is a linear game, it is fairly easy to know where the next point you're going to have to go to is. Unlike a true open world game where you would potentially have players wandering in several different directions. See, the timeline specifically of this zombie apocalypse doesn't seem to be as fast as you normally see in TV and movies. It seems like people had enough time to put up signs and such, although not really enough time for it to have mattered.
Weapons over here. Pills here.
Does anybody not have pills? No. So, and you can't really force Lewis to take pills. See, that's funny because over here, then there, like, where does this connect? I guess it connects here to this area. And when you get up from a scenario like that, you pretty much are better off meleeing than even trying to shoot.
I'm
If anything, this level feels awkwardly back and forward. It's like there are definitely different paths that you could branch through here. You see, there's more paths this way,
Reloading.
which I guess this is just a blocked off section. This is a great example though of like the problem with having a 4-player game with friendly fire, in that there are plenty of opportunities for 4 people to just be crammed into a doorway. Even when you look at like SWAT teams as they're depicted in media, they tend to not be 4 people all shooting at the same time and all grouped up as a group of 4. It's usually groups of 2. A left, a right, maybe somebody with a shotgun in the center. Yep. The reaction of the characters automatically yelling when you're grabbed by a smoker is a little off-putting. It's disassociative in my mind because, like, I know I'm playing as the girl Zoe, I believe, but hearing her say reloading just feels like I'm hearing a character saying reloading. It doesn't feel like I am that character.
Reloading.
And inherently that's probably going to always be the case because you're going to be jumping between characters
Reloading.
very often. You don't get to just pick a character and stick with it in the multiplayer. I don't think, because there's you don't have duplicate characters,
Weapons here.
and because you don't have duplicate characters, that means either you are hoping that there's such a massive player base in a 13-year-old game, which there almost certainly wouldn't be, that you could be placed in a level, but that you could be matched with a group of other players who also want you to play as that character, or you're just going to be loading forever, or it's not even going to give you that opportunity and it's just going to give you whatever character is spare. And even if you are the first one to create a lobby, as it were, it's more often than not going to feel like you're being forced into either waiting a ridiculously long amount of time to play as the character you want to play as, or into playing a character you don't particularly want to play as. It doesn't seem like there's an achievement for getting an entire wave of zombies killed without somebody taking damage. Although that does feel like something that should have an achievement. The Riverside City, as it is much more gated off than
Reloading.
the Mercy hospital scenario. But otherwise, this is basically the same city environment, same car textures, same building textures. This could have all been one big city. I suppose that is what they're trying to do, is have city environments and then have more rural environments. This is funny, I haven't seen this dog food. I wonder why somebody would bother to animate that. Then you have a toilet on a bucket, which Yeah, it seems like the artists are getting ambitious on unimportant things. Here we can see we're back to the construction areas. But see, I think part of the problem here with this game is that you have a level of ambition around the wrong things.
I'm reloading.
It would make more sense if this scenario was more open world and more varied.
Hunter's got Lewis.
Like, but I don't think that's really what this is. I think this is just
Fire in the hole. Reloading.
we are running into less and less opportunities to get the Molotovs and the pipe bombs. But yeah, that really didn't. Yeah, I bet this is just somebody's dog they wanted to put in the game. But if you can have a unique stationary image, then why not either see if you can make a 3D model that would take up about the same amount of space, although maybe that's not the case. It's a little surprising there aren't any short zombies or children type zombies. Like, they don't want you shooting children, certainly, but they could possibly have legless zombies or something that is lower, that would move the gameplay loop towards you aiming downward, or maybe have some super tall zombies in the same way that would have you aiming upward. There's just nothing in here.
Reloading.
And this time the AI director got bored and gave a hunter and a smoker. It's almost always the same couple of combinations. Very rarely witch, almost never bruiser. Well, I'd say almost never witch and very rarely bruiser would be the better way to put that. I guess he's there.
Reloading.
I guess I'm at the point where I can heal myself. It seems like the game was bored by that interaction too, so it also threw a boomer and a hunter at us. Very rarely do you have an AI just showing that it's actually bored with its own game. Like, you would kind of want to be able to describe it more as an AI was grooving with the players and thinking, oh yeah, this is coming out great. This really feels like a highly fun interaction. Like, these are not as good as these. But none of these are particularly that useful. But Let's see. Throw it as far as possible. Because this is more of a suburban environment than the city parts, we're seeing more. Seeing more houses, but the houses really don't mean anything. They're just an experiment on can you make dark corners. Like everyone is boarded up. So it gives you the feeling that Riverside
Nice shot.
was overrun slightly slower than the main city you started in. And that's why there's more boarded up sections. And maybe you could take that idea to the next level and have like barbed wire or booby traps laying around. Maybe more guns, maybe more bullets. Because just seeing it boarded up like this, it kind of feels more like this was a city that was just preparing for a major storm, like a hurricane or tornado or something, more than they were trying to stop zombies. The zombies aren't even showing them as being particularly stopped or slowed down by doors.
This way.
Interesting. It points up that way. So it wants me to go up here. No fall damage in this game either.
Ammo here.
I don't hear a zombie. Here you have a different looking desk, a different little looking area.
Reloading.
I think I kind of hear a witch potentially coming.
I'm reloading. There's a pipe bomb here. Grenade. I got a pipe bomb over here.
We hear the witch, but apparently the witch is not getting startled by the...
I think I hear a hunt. Grenade! Well, this looks dangerous.
Alright. Think we're fairly safe. Looking in this way. Now we're back to the bathrooms we'd already seen. Maybe if the respawn areas had just been bathrooms,
I hear a witch. Lights
that
off.
would have might have worked well too. So I think we jump out this window.
Boomer!
And I think we intentionally avoid it, or we throw a pipe bomb at it.
Fire in the hole!
Like,
Look!
even if I was to crouch down here,
Look!
yeah, I don't know how. Like, even with a sniper rifle, we're gonna have to go right through the witch. I have no more pipe bombs or grenades. It's not gonna respawn anymore for us. Alright, well,
I'm grabbing a Molotov.
let's try this. Let's see. Problem is she is right there.
She's getting mad.
Alright.
Francis.
Oh, you look like shit. But I think I can get you back up on your feet.
Thanks, Francis.
Alright.
God, this real.
Take some pills. And let's just get out of here. There was really no way around that. And funnily, we had all
Ammo
the
here.
guns that would have been useful in kind of the wrong place for that encounter anyways.
I'm not doing so good, guys.
Even the game is pointing out that on normal difficulty, I'm kind of sucking. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
Be ready to fight a horde when this went lowered. Otherwise,
I feel awful.
I guess we should just start this. Stallion, Broken Heart, Terror.
Here they come.
These zombies still coming out of nowhere. It's totally not worth it to even use the Gatling gun
I'm reloading.
because it's too slow and doesn't really do much more damage. Or if it does any more damage than what you would do with just the assault gun. And since we have an infinite pile of bullets available to us, after this I can just completely run out of bullets and be happy about it. And see, the idea of like staying together with the group is not so tightly a concept here, or tightly implemented as a concept here, that it really does anything or means anything. I could see a future version of this idea where for every inch you are away from your group, you are getting more damage done to you.
Reloading!
Hunter on Francis.
Like
Ammo here.
that would definitely be a different experience. Everybody's used their pills at this point. We desperately need to get out of here and not waste our time. And see, that's not like the big conflict point or anything.
Nice shot.
And see, I don't know how much, if any,
Bad.
damage you take when you're dragged down. This kind of feels like this is a whole level specifically designed to drag you down to a more dangerous center, but honestly, it doesn't really look like there's much of a difference here.
God.
See, this
Really
lighting
hurt.
doesn't really indicate anything, and that doesn't really indicate anything. Yeah, this feels like this is where a boss fight would have been. Otherwise, there's no reason why the road would be blocked up like that.
Help you out, but
Nice shot.
Yep. I am in the worst case scenario where I can't even be knocked down, which in single player really sucks because I'm having to maintain like the entirety of the forward momentum.
Damn it! Will you knock it off?
Reloading.
Like, if ever there was a time to run, now would be the time.
Safe house up ahead. I
Guys,
know we make
I don't think I'm gonna make it with
This was not the safe house. But I suppose this might be a good place for me to stand back and let the other people save my butt. I'm down to 12 health? 11? Oh yeah, I have no
Oh god.
choice. So we're gonna miss some content.
Reloading.
I'm at 1 health. So am I just gonna die?
I need some help or I'm gonna die.
I think you're left at 1. Nobody's got anything for me. And I'm moving incredibly slow. So it's just compounding the problems on top of each other.
I hear a hunter. Come
I'm
on
down
out.
again and I'm
Hold on,
dead.
let me patch you up.
So the game decided
Thanks. I owe you.
to let me have a health pack. I guess we probably should just go back and look here. Here, now that we have a little bit of health. Just to see what was over here. It's nothing. Anyways. Was there anything in here? Nope. Just spawn closets or monster closets. Sounds like there's a boomer or smoker. Alright. And that, I suppose, highlights the major problem with the idea of just rushing towards the sanctuary, is that the sanctuary might be very, very far away. Clearly, people have been living in less than residential environments. I don't know if there's a specific reason why that room would have been a good place to rest. Most zombie apocalypses don't play well to the idea of like slowly, meticulously working your way from point A to point B. It seems like you've got to move with speed and haste. There we go.
Nice.
Otherwise, you are going to die completely. I wish there was a pea shooter weapon. I mean, you could certainly say there's a whole collection of weapons that would be appreciated if there was more of them, but something that barely did anything, maybe just sedated or made people go to sleep, like a dart gun. That you could use on the witch and was very effective on the witch, but not very effective on anyone else. It would be funny in some zombie game if there was a like dart gun that had the cure in it, and then you would cure people, and then they'd immediately just become the new target for the rest of the zombie hordes and get turned back into zombies. There's not, I think, any difference between that gun and what I already had, so picking up more guns doesn't give you ammo, where it in a lot of cases would. Look how small that flashlight light is. Let's see. Bring out the nukes. So why would there be a spotlight up there? I don't know. Alright, well. I don't know if I can particularly even get a lot of people to shoot at. The idea of these being shooting galleries seems to be getting reduced, not increased, as we get into the end of this scenario and more difficult sections, which, yeah, playing this on normal, it's gonna be a hassle to do the final part of this chapter. I may die a couple times, and there's no guarantee that any of the scenarios are easier or more difficult, so apparently we're not using the van. You'd think they would be trying every single car, like at the very least starting a car would I can't see, but I'll just fire blindly in this direction.
Reloading.
Interesting how the audio started playing crickets just out of nowhere. It's still hard to feel like this is supposed to be a creepy game instead of an action game. Even on normal difficulty, it didn't, even when I'm about to die, it didn't feel like a horror game or creepy game. It felt very much just like a action game. And if this is supposed to be an action game,
I'm reloading.
again, just a lot of fences here. It's
Reloading.
not really comparing to like Resident Evil 4. Or even like I didn't play Resident Evil 3, so I won't use that comparison.
No!
We ideally, it seems to me like this is a case where
Weapons here.
they intentionally barricaded this area, this house, but then the front door's locked down, so it's hardly a place where you can continue to use it as a fortified
Ammo
area.
here. Pills here.
You can't open these refrigerators, which that
Through here.
could have been an idea. Certainly, you already have a door opening
Reloading.
code and an item placement code, so wouldn't be crazy. Here you have a little playground, play bench set, and this makes a lot of sense. I'm surprised we haven't seen more of that. I imagine what we're doing here is transitioning once again from the city part back into the forest part, where it would have been kind of nice to have some kind of enemy of some sort that only was in the forested part, like, or
Reloading.
maybe an argument for bigger zombies to show up in the forest part a little bit more often. And I guess we're not going this way, where it definitely feels like the entire city section of the scenario could have been skipped, and you could have just potentially ridden a
There's a
road.
first aid kit here. First aid kit here.
You guys better get it.
Pills here.
somebody take those pills. So did they get the first aid kit? Yes. Did they get the pills? Yes. So now we're
We can
going
get to the river through here.
through a park, which, again, this is where you would want to see possibly some zombie bears, zombie deer, any kind of animals. We've seen absolutely no animals in this game at all, no dogs, which, heck, that was in Resident Evil 1.
I'm reloading.
This does give them a slight opportunity to have a slightly different experience.
Walker!
Out of here!
But yeah, even if they didn't want you shooting pets like dogs, like nobody's gonna really be concerned with zombie birds attacking or zombie cockroaches, slugs. It'd be a difficult thing to be able to fight zombie cockroaches, since cockroaches in general are
Reloading.
dangerously close to being zombies in real life, and that they're super hard to kill. It looks like we can go this way, so we probably should check this out, but it also looks like this might be very dangerous.
Reloading. Time to start some fires.
Okay,
Cover me.
go ahead and heal. The game has decided that I am bad and probably turned it down to something that would be closer to a easy mode. I have to wonder though if
Reloading.
there's kind of nothing here.
Reloading.
Well, you can walk in water. Interesting.
Reloading!
So are we going to this boathouse? Alright, so we are going to have to defend this final act. I'm not sure I ever made it this far in this scenario. I don't remember ever doing this.
I'm reloading.
And everything up until this point has been very redundant stuff, so it's possible I've never played any of this scenario. I think I remember the church, but I may very well have played it once and ended up dying in multiplayer and not making it to the end.
I'm reloading.
This is an interesting, unique building, but it's not something that I think you get to reuse. Yeah, and it really feels like unless you just want
Reloading.
more score, there's probably not a good reason to wander around. These all just seem like random assortments of people. And honestly, they're easier to kill when they are
Reloading.
zombies are easier to kill when they are not when they're grouped up together instead of small isolated groups. I imagine we might very well end up having to run over there.
I'm reloading.
Reloading.
I don't know why survivors would try and help other people to that extent. Maybe they see them. Because we're hearing like these boat sounds. So we have a decent collection of things up here. And then kind of a broken collection here.
Weapons here.
If you're out there and you're armed, pick up.
First aid here.
So we can close the door. We can see some pills here.
Pills here.
Which
Anybody, come on, please.
we'll do this. Now, there is a scenario called the sacrifice, which one assumes at the end of the day that's the scenario where not all 4 players can survive. Or maybe all 4 players do survive, and then the storyline.
Hello, we're heading to the military outpost upriver. We can come get you in 10 minutes. Arm yourselves for the trip and tell me when to head out.
Okay. So I'm gonna
They're gonna swarm when we
activate.
come in. Perfect. Should be
Let's
there
go.
in 10 minutes.
We're just waiting for the first signs of zombies.
All right. Fire in the hole.
Ready, ladies!
Time to start some fires. Grenade.
I'm just gonna try and wait for the fire to stop burning.
Fire in the hole.
Wait for the next group of them. See, that was about five
Grenade.
minutes. It really wasn't anything. I've left the group and that was a mistake, obviously. Let's see.
No, we gotta move. I gotta heal you.
I'll just heal myself, heal our friends, and grab another heal kit while we're at it.
Hunter around. Don't get pounced.
30 minutes. I mean, I suppose a lot can happen in 30 minutes, but it doesn't really feel like a lot is going to happen. I'm just going to shoot in that general direction and hope that that was the right direction. Ooh, how about that? We'll trade some blows. I'm about to get knocked down.
Cover me.
2 minutes. Yeah, and unless they're gonna throw a witch at you that's just by default already upset with you, it feels like you're unlikely to really run into a big kerfuffle. Didn't realize there was fire that I could have thrown. And see, since we're going to be done with this and not be able to carry any of that content, any of that stuff with us anyways, there really is no reason not to just use everything we've got. That should have been 2 minutes. Is he here yet? I don't see him. Yeah. people are not even chasing after me, so this is working very nicely. So we might as well just see if we can shoot some things. Yeah, that didn't work.
Reloading.
Zoe!
Are we? Where is he? I don't see him, but I'll try and kill him. He's stuck, so we can just shoot him completely. That got us an achievement.
Boat's here. Let's go.
Where's the boat? I don't see it. There it is. Alright, so they're all running that way. Let's go help Francis. We got Francis. There's Francis and Bill and Lewis, which means we're here. And then you have a very kind of poorly animated boat, which, yeah, that whole building, custom architecture, this whole boat, kind of not going to be used a lot. There might have been an idea, certainly, on the idea of shooting galleries where you're on the water riding on a boat, and the zombies really can't crawl up the sides of the boat much, and thus you're just shooting large hordes of zombies in the water. That would be a different kind of gameplay mechanic. I don't know if that particularly works well as a multiplayer game element, and that again falls back to the instantaneous feeling I had with this game, is that it is compromised severely to be a multiplayer game. Honestly, I think a lot of games, if not most multiplayer games, are compromised severely to involve multiplayer. 2,548 zombies were killed. That was considerably more, nearly 1,000 more, it felt like, I think. And the reasoning behind having a multiplayer, it's interesting how it centers right in between two options. The reasoning behind having multiplayer is not a pure reason, in my opinion. So we've done 2, so the third DLC developer commentary here should be the sewer, I think. So let's start that. Like, because they wanted it, particularly 13 years ago, they wanted to make these games multiplayer so that you kept on playing them and didn't take them back to like a GameStop and trade them in for other games, because they still to this day don't make any money on the sales of used games. And but B, they also were setting the groundwork, even if they didn't really know it at the time, to have microtransactions in one form or another, having people shoot
Initially,
buy
designers
cosmetics
placed the spawn
or other
locations
things.
for common infected mobs in each map. However, it became obvious after a few playthroughs that skilled survivors knew exactly where each of these were, killing the atmosphere of anticipation and constant danger. To address this, we tried creating sets of these mob generators and randomizing which sets were active for a given session. This helped somewhat, but ultimately it meant that experienced survivor teams would just have to check a few more known locations. Since a primary design goal of Left 4 Dead was to create an experience that could be replayed indefinitely, we needed a new approach. We decided to go for the ideal but riskier solution, a completely procedural approach that would determine where to create mobs on the fly as the team was playing. Although it took longer to build this system, in the end it worked better than we even hoped. Not only were experienced teams no longer able to expect where mobs would hit, but the process of populating maps with enemies was hugely simplified. What used to take weeks of painful iteration and constant updating as maps were changed became a 5-minute process that was much more tolerant of map changes and actually played better. It was so successful, in fact, that we can't imagine building Left 4 Dead without a system for this kind of procedural content. We later
Not just
expanded this
listening at
system
the
to add
moment.
wandering zombies to the environments to increase the survivors' tactical choices and add additional variety to the game experience. Once this design decision was made, these wanderers were added to every map in the game with just an afternoon's worth of code from a single programmer. We play-tested the idea that very same day.
The problem with that idea, and again, it feels like that's just a compromise out of, well, we want people to play this game, this scenario multiple times, whereas Resident Evil 4 really probably only wanted you to play the main story twice, maybe 3 times for fun. And Resident Evil 4 did have some procedurally generated placement of enemies. Sometimes if you would die in a room, you would go back into a room and it would remove certain characters and make it easier. So it really comes off as something that feels a little lazy to say, oh, we wanted to just have an AI or procedure generate the location of zombies, and thus what we're really saying is an analogy to they wanted a computer to write a great novel, a Shakespeare play, or a great movie in this case, instead of actually making a great movie themselves. This is the point where I made the mistake thinking that this was a visual glitch with the rain coming down. See, this room and the room before this, if I recall correctly, was in a building. I thought this was just another building, so I was looking through here and seeing the raindrops fall, and I thought that was a visual glitch implying that there was glass there when there really wasn't. Part of that becomes a problem that there's just no audio playing of the rain. It would make way more sense for the audio to play in here, and it just isn't. Yeah, and I would say Left 4 Dead as a game is not establishing a great movie by any means.
Weapons over here.
It is instead just a generic procedurally a generic procedurally generated experience. And even if you look at something like Deus Ex Human Revolution, which is a pretty good game but does have
Molotovs over here.
some lack of polish in some of its handmade areas, at least they tried in a lot of scenarios. Deus Ex as a game that tries to give you 3 different ways, or at least a couple different ways to enter a building, would totally not work if it was procedurally
Network
generated.
bandwidth usage when playing Left 4 Dead is a huge concern. We're constantly looking for ways to reduce how much data the server needs to send to each of the players. In most of our multiplayer
I can
games,
just
we're only
not even
concerned with other
look or
players and
aim
their
the gun while
projectiles
this
and
is
weapons.
playing.
But in Left 4 Dead, we must update not only the behavior of other players, but those of a horde of infected. In the hospital campaign, a lot of the surfaces are flat, such as halls and roadways. By making sure the infected only send their height when it changes, instead of giving complete position updates, we shaved almost 10% of the bandwidth from the server.
So that's an interesting idea, that since most of the game is nearly at the same height, I mean, I went up a step here, they don't have the Z location, as it were, of the zombies update. Network usage is always a problem in a multiplayer game.
Pipe bomb.
Even now. Of course, I think by modern standards, 13 years, even the terrible internet in the United States has improved enough that it probably wouldn't be a real issue. It wasn't even really an issue when I played this when it first came
The
out.
process behind designing Zoe's character wasn't as straightforward as the other three. Developing a young female in a zombie apocalypse isn't easy with a backstory like hers. She had to be attractive and worn down at the same time. She needed to be tough and able to hold her own, even though she's occasionally terrified. Her readability was also something we had to take into consideration. A bright red jacket solved the problem. It pops out amongst the gritty, desaturated zombies and the dark, subdued environment. As far as the rest of her appearance, there was a little bit of back and forth as her character came into focus through iteration. Finally, we were certain that the character model met our goals, and Zoe unfolded into an everyday young woman who everyone can relate to.
So, like, she kind of looks like a rejected version of Chell, which is from Portal, who we don't see that much. I don't know why. I mean, this is almost certainly these were mandates from some somewhat sexist manager. She needs to be attractive. Why does she need to be attractive? I don't think Francis is particularly that attractive. He looks fine. I don't think Bill is particularly that attractive. He looks fine. Why does she have to be vulnerable? None of the other characters really come off as vulnerable. There are certainly, it seems, requirements that were placed on the female character that were not seemingly placed on the other characters, and you could kind of tell that with the first sentence that they said it was more difficult to make a female character than a male character. There really shouldn't be any difference there. None of these characters are really given any backstory so far as we've played. So yeah, you don't really have to say that sometimes she's frightened. Why is the female character the only one that seems like sometimes they're frightened? It seems like all the characters would sometimes be frightened when they're being grabbed by zombies and smokers. Even the way the development is talked about of the female character comes off as different. Now, I might be able to excuse that in my mind in the fact that they've had basically a completely different person talk about completely different parts of the development in every developer commentary, whereas most developer commentaries stick to having 2 or 3 people talk about it, and they often will have other people who worked on it just give their notes. That way there's kind of a following, like, developer commentary would be like a director's commentary. It'd be very weird in a movie to have the key grip or the audio engineer also in that in the room. I mean, you could have one of those people, but to have 6 or 7 people in the room is very weird.
Our first maps created specifically for the game were giant non-linear city sections. The idea was that the survivor team would have to find their way through the zombie.
I could also throw out an accusation of having a female talk about the female character
and fending off the hordes
for
of zombies
tokenistic
completely consumed
reasons.
players' attention. Adding on-the-fly discussions of which way to go were slow and frustrating. More importantly, however, was that the teams quickly found their favorite route and tended to always run the same way every time, minimizing their on-the-fly decisions. By paring down the city to a representative and fairly linear route, we could better spend our limited resources making that area highly detailed.
Why does Valve have limited resources even 13 years ago? Valve was, unless I'm recalling incorrectly, here's some birds. They just fly up and don't do anything. Valve was rolling in cash from Steam even then. There's no reason that their resources should have been limited. What's funny is this developer commentary clearly is scripted. This whole area would have had the AI director throwing more zombies at me and getting bored a lot faster if it could. So it seems like the AI director is completely dismantled or turned off, and all we have are a small selection of notice how that one just fell through the ground. A small selection of wandering zombies, which must be slightly different code than the other zombies.
Originally, the survivor's path forced them through a gas station convenience store and out by these pumps. Due to the path, many players accidentally shot the pumps from close proximity, leading to a premature and seemingly unfair end to their survivor experience. Through a cycle of playtesting and iteration, we ultimately arrived at this layout, which preserved both the life of the player and the spectacle of the gas station detonating.
So, I don't think there's a way you would have been able to ever go up there. An interesting area I missed. Wow, that looks like you could loop all the way back to the beginning of the level, which if this was a player versus player scenario, that might make more sense. But it doesn't really make any sense here. See, this is all boarded up.
This loading dock was another arena that we designated for our mini finale. This time, instead of locking the survivors in a defensive position, we decided to have them ride the lift up to a rooftop encounter with the horde.
See, that's a fairly short story note. Everybody,
Yep, I'm ready.
I say we just do it.
they're all trying to jump.
Good to go.
There's not so much that you can really shoot at on top of the second roof. Yeah, there's kind of nothing here, so you might as well just move forward. You have the loud noise playing when you walk on this metal roof, and that doesn't really play any role in anything. And see, this is a memorable event, and it's a memorable event not because this is procedurally generated at all. This is totally scripted. Some artists and iterations of playtesting just determined how this was going to play. There might be a slight variation when you play this outside of developer commentary, where you might get a hunter or a boomer or a smoker. There might have even been an interesting twist where a witch was around in a rare 1 out of 20 playthroughs. But the locations that these zombies are going to come running from are very scripted. I would be surprised if they aren't actually pre-programmed paths that have been hard-coded into it. The zombies do seem to like to go in the same linear lines, even when they could zigzag a lot more.
Based on the success of procedurally populating the world with wanderers and mobs, we decided to try to guarantee a consistent dramatic experience for the survivors. Through playtesting, we observed sessions where some survivor teams would occasionally get into a downward spiral of being overwhelmed to the point that they were never able to regroup and get ahead. This was partially due to some poor choices of the survivor players in varying skill levels, but also due to the luck of the draw with the procedural population system. A random streak of bad dice rolls would either be incredibly exciting for some teams or a death sentence for others. To address this, we created a system that tracks each survivor's stress level by watching for events like how much damage are you taking, how many zombies have you killed near you, and so on. if a survivor's stress level gets too high, the system will step in and forcibly throttle back the zombie population system to make sure the team gets a break every now and then. These breaks are critical for a couple of reasons. The primary reason is battle fatigue. Constant fighting and gunfire is tiring. Secondly, the team needs an end to these skirmishes along the way to give them a chance to regroup, heal, and reassess. Lastly, these big exciting battles are only exciting if there are also periods of quiet, creepy, tension, and anticipation to contrast them against. This dramatic pacing is really critical to creating a fun experience. Once this system was in place, we realized we had all this useful information on how the survivor team is actually doing. From a dramatic standpoint, ideally we want to see the survivor team just make it into the next checkpoint, limping in, being chased by the horde, so they can celebrate when the door closes and they yell, "We made it."
This Eastern Waterworks sign sticks out to me as though it should have been a hint to a future level, but I don't think we ever go anywhere that you could have labeled directly as Eastern Waterworks, although some of the sewer levels could have been merged together, sections of sewer levels. I think, though, as far as silent or quiet sections, Dead Space does a way better job. Like, nobody's even taken any damage in this section. That's how easy this is. It's like everybody is exactly at 100, I think. And that's not just because I've gotten really good at this game. And I think it's worth pointing out that, yes, I'm very possibly comparing a 13-year-old game like Left 4 Dead to a game that might only be like 6 years old, like Dead Space 1. I have no idea how old Dead Space 1 is. But while that probably isn't the fairest way to look at a game through a historical perspective, it is 100% the fair way to look at a game from a gamer's perspective, in the sense that you can never not have that competition. You will inherently have people potentially buying Left 4 Dead in 2021, 2031, and they will compare their experience of playing a game like Left 4 Dead today, or whenever today is, with every other game that they may have played or have already experienced.
Fire in the hole!
Seriously, if there is... If I'm not grinding out achievements while I'm doing this, I'm going to be fairly upset with that. And so that does mean that in the future, this door is the weirdest door. Like, you have some really weird stuff here. You have a blown up sequence that you never really get to blow anything else up in the game, as far as what I've seen so far. Just little canisters and propane tanks. It'd be funny if you got into a building and realized that it had C4 or pipe bombs all on the walls, and you have to run through it very quickly or before it decides to blow up, either because of friendly fire or just random shots, random timing elements. I thought there was a commentary. I thought there was a commentary over here, but not seeing it. Yeah, it feels like there should be an achievement for meleeing a bunch of zombies. See, I hear the director getting bored with us and playing music even. And yet, we're not getting hordes thrown at us. They probably set those stress levels they were talking about to the maximum, just as a quick way of disabling it. Of course, the idea of each player having an individual stress level does not fully address the issue, because there could be one really good player and 3 really bad players, or vice versa. And
one film
it's
technique we
difficult
brought
to
to Left 4
balance
Dead
that
was
out.
the idea of grain. Film grain is most apparent in dark scenes, which made it an attractive visual effect for our game. Grain does a good job of implying detail in darkness, adding grittiness and texture. However, we found in playtesting that if we applied grain uniformly, people would quickly tire of the effect. We hit upon a method for dynamically varying the grain effect based on light level. Scenes range from grainy texture in darkness and shadows to no grain at all in the brightest spots.
I would say modern techniques of visuals do not work well with graininess. And in fact, I'm not really seeing any graininess at all. So they probably turned that off. Like, nobody is making film on film or broadcasting film that much. The grain would be a preferable scenario. Like, I'm trying to recreate that whole scene and I do not see any film grain. Did I turn it off? Possibly. I wouldn't even want to turn it on even if it was. Yeah, there's nothing here that's specifically labeled as film grain. So it's pretty much non-existent. It's very possible that the film grain is all getting removed because of the anti-stropic filtering or one of the other settings too. But yeah, modern people who watch modern movies are not going to be enthralled with the idea of film grain. I think most movie makers, even when they were using film and that was their only option, were probably not thrilled with film grain, and probably would only highlight it as a good thing out of just pandering as an excuse. Yeah, movies, even like low-budget grindhouse movies, are not going to use film grain much, if they use it at all.
Still can't get used to this.
Let's see.
Fire in the hole!
Just throw that.
Molotovs over here!
Just for fun. Yep. I suppose there is a question as to whether Lewis was scripted to say something there, or just no sound effect was played in a long enough time that there was an awkward silence. I mean, that would be an easy way to program whether or not someone talks is just, hey, have we heard any zombies scream, or any other character say anything in reaction to their situation. We are running into fewer and fewer developer commentary nodes, and what they have to say is never been particularly insightful. They're definitely not giving us a master class in the development of this game specifically, nor are they really trying to explain maybe basic things.
This is not going to be sanitary.
Yeah. And see, I'm playing as Lewis, so it's my character that is saying things only. We played this section twice. Once.
Pipe bomb here! Look out! Grenade!
played this section once where there was a witch and it killed us, and then we played the section the second time.
Grenade! Pipe bomb!
It's still very annoying that none of these other characters can hold an item. See, if you're trying to get the achievement to blow up a certain number of people, not really going to be able to do that as easily when other people are
Left 4 Dead was created with the goal
stealing
of
your
being
kills.
replayable. This goal causes a problem for writing, where characters will have the same speech opportunity multiple times over a single session. So we have to avoid having the speech become repetitive. We do that in multiple ways. One is to have almost all the speech have a random element to when it plays. This stops the player from being able to tune out the speech because it is expected for a certain action. We successfully tested this on Team Fortress 2 and have expanded on that system. In Left 4 Dead, not only does the initial speech have a random element, but we also have follow-up lines that may or may not play after the initial line, randomizing the speech opportunity further. We also limit how often some lines play. No matter how witty or funny a line is, you're sick of it the 100th time you hear it in an hour-long play session. To address this, our vocalization system allows us to control the rarity of individual lines or even complete speech opportunities. For instance, a speech opportunity may only fire if you are playing the character Bill and Zoe is healing you and she has just healed you a few minutes earlier. This type of randomization based on combination of criteria help make the speech seem natural and avoid having the player hear it too often.
Yeah, but in fairness, also in that scenario, if you're only playing as Zoe and you're healing Bill a few minutes after Bill needed to be healed before, I'd say 98% of all players will not play enough Left 4 Dead to ever hear that line of dialogue. So you have to balance out, was it worth the budget to hire a voice actor and a writer to write a line of dialogue for a scenario like that? There is an issue certainly with him mentioning Left 4 Dead in the same breath as Team Fortress 2, because Team Fortress 2 is still being played today, 13 years later. That's the other entrance we would have come down. And I think a major reason why Team Fortress 2 is still being played is because it has a bigger player base, but also there's probably been more mods and add-ons added to Team Fortress 2. I think there are elements and items still being added by Valve employees directly. But I think you also would have an example of the nicheness of zombie horror games versus is this one we've already talked about? Yeah. Zombie horror games versus a bright, colorful, slightly comedic first-person shooter. Also in Team Fortress, you're not, I think, forced to be in a group of 4 in which you have to play one of each of the characters. Maybe you do. Maybe all of that's true. I've never actually played Team Fortress 2, so wouldn't really know. Interesting, there's a split here. And then, is this really a split? Yeah, it is. Yeah. It runs into the same problem once again, though. You may still have people playing Counter-Strike Go, and you might still have people playing Team Fortress 2, but you can't make a Team Fortress 3 because then you get complaints about how can you release Team Fortress 3 without and not release halos, right? Of course, that's something that they probably should just do. Like, piss off a small number of people to solve
For much of
the
the
3
development of Left 4
problem.
Dead, versus mode was the default and only mode. Balance problems eventually forced us to make it a separate game type. The problem was that if we balanced it to provide the survivors a reasonable chance of escape, the experience was a long and frustrating one for the player zombies. Changes that were necessary to make the player zombie experience satisfying also served to make the experience dramatically harder for the survivors. Separating versus mode allowed us to break out of this dilemma. Rather than aiming for a 50-50 shot at the survivors escaping, now we're aiming for a shorter, more intense experience where the survivors are unlikely to make it to the end. The goal is simply to get further than the other team did. It's more fun for the zombies, and your reward for having a harder time as the survivors is that you get to switch teams after you're slaughtered and do the same to them.
Ammo here.
There is a versus mode in this game, in the first one. I knew there was one in either the first or the second game, but there seems to be no real way to play that in single player. So you're, I think, fairly limited there on that aspect. So we'll have to see if there's a versus mode that's A, playable at all, and B, playable as someone who's not an expert, potentially, to Left 4 Dead, because I've been playing it for 13 years. So I guess this probably was supposed to be the waterworks area. We didn't get a witch. We also didn't get the gargantuan character.
This ladder, from day one, has always been a really exciting place in the campaign, because it forces the team to separate a bit, and players can't shoot while they're on the ladder. If a team's in great shape, they just fly through this area. But if the team is really hurting, everyone will stop and look at each other to see who has the most health. That guy will generally go up first, because chances are there's going to be infected up there. It's not always the case, but often enough that whoever goes up first is going to take a bit of a beating.
Well, in single player, that's not even a choice because you are forced to go forward and up the ladder. None of the other characters will do it first. And it is, I try not to be just totally a jerk in my criticism, certainly, but it's laughably stupid to even give 2 sentences of commentary about a ladder and say, oh, this is the exciting part of the level. How pathetic is your level, really, that the ladder leaving the sewer section is the exciting part? Like, the much more exciting part was the gargantuan that attacked, which that clearly was a scripted boss event, and yet they didn't even bother to put any commentary around that. So unless there was possibly a scenario where you actually wouldn't run into the gargantuan character, I think that should have been talked about. It happens the 2 times I played, certainly. And yeah, we see a lot of scripted characters. Although I feel like even when I played it, I had either drawn enough zombies out down into the sewer, or the AI director had decided to not spawn that many zombies. It would have made a lot more sense for the time I came up here for it to be surrounded by zombies. And this would also be a great scene for that game idea I mentioned before, where you have like an adrenaline mode and you can shoot a whole bunch of zombies for 10 seconds or so, and whatever number of zombies you don't headshot or shoot in some way then start to descend upon you. I really would like some explanation as far as the idea of just wandering around and
Get to the hospital!
and shooting these wandering zombies. Like, it is the gameplay mechanic I have found, but it is also a gameplay mechanic that seems to have not been intended. Like, I'm trying to make my own fun here, wandering around, whereas if I was playing multiplayer, what I would be doing right now would be incredibly infuriating to a lot of players. They'd be very upset with me and probably vote to kick me because I'm just wandering around looking at the level. That's part of the problem, certainly, of different types of players in general. That there are people who like to play single-player games, like me, who like to explore and see as much as I can. And this game really doesn't accommodate that at all because there's no collectibles and there's basically nothing to see in the corners anyways. It's kind of funny that this wall is unfinished and looks like it's been painted over graffiti.
The witch is much rarer than the boomer, and her penalty is much more severe. Basically, if you shoot the witch, you will likely die. The witch has two functions. One is to provide an exception to the rule of shoot everything that moves. The primary function of the witch, however, is to force a change of pace on the survivor team. Ideally, discovering a witch near your path will result in the team going into stealth mode, shutting off their flashlights and walking carefully around her as to not disturb her. This is a large departure from the intense and loud pace of normal gameplay. In earlier versions of the witch's behavior, she was far more dangerous. Once she was set off, she went berserk and attacked all of the survivors until she was killed. This proved to be too harsh, particularly for teams of new players. One stray bullet could wake the witch, and she would slay the entire team, ending the game. Now she limits her wrath to the survivor who harassed her. If she successfully kills that player, she retreats from the scene entirely.
What I would want to point out is there's a couple of issues with the witch in that she's in her underwear when none of the other characters are in their underwear. It frankly implies with her actions that she might actually have been a zombie / rape victim. I don't know which, if not both, would have occurred first. I mean, but yeah, it's once again weird as far as gender equality that none of the other zombies, none of even the other few female zombie models are even in slightly ripped clothing, and yet she is completely in her underwear and drawn somewhat detailed for a zombie too. She seems to be basically weeping and shaking like she's encountered some major trauma, and she'll be completely left alone if you don't startle her, although it seems like there's probably 2 or 3 different ways you can startle her, which is problematic.
The witch is much rarer than the boomer.
She's
and her
low on the
penalty is
ground,
much more severe.
where I would
Basically,
think
if
she'd
you
want to
shoot the
be a
witch,
bigger
you will likely
character.
die. The witch has two functions. One is to provide an exception to the rule of shoot everything that moves. The primary function of the witch, however, is to force a change of pace on the survivor team.
There might be the idea
Ideally,
that she was
discovering
supposed to
a witch
be
near
a
your path will
feral
result in the team going
zombie,
into stealth mode, shutting off their
where the other
flashlights and
zombies
walking
aren't
carefully
quite
around
as
her
feral.
to not disturb her. This
I
is
don't
a
feel like
large
there's a
departure
big
from the
enough
intense and
split
loud
there.
pace of normal gameplay.
Her hands
In earlier
and fingers
versions
are
of the
covered
witch's
in blood.
behavior, she was far more dangerous. Once she was set off, she went berserk and attacked
She
all
also
of the
seems to be
survivors until she
the
was
only
killed.
character that has like
This
a
proved to be
lot
too
of hair
harsh,
effects
particularly for teams of new players.
on
One
her.
stray bullet could wake the witch, and she would slay the entire team, ending the game.
Yeah, maybe
Now she
she's
limits her
super
wrath to
skinny
the
because
survivor who harassed her.
she's
If she successfully kills that player, she retreats from the scene entirely.
starving to death. Interesting. Notice how that time she didn't get startled. So they literally had the AI there, the computer, accidentally startle the witch. Which that's not fair, but I have seen that happen, certainly. I think there is a real rethink there. And clearly that did occur because they, after that point, Back for Blood is not having a witch character. Instead, they've changed it to a snitch character, which looks more like a male character in their trolls. Troll mutant zombie equivalents. That being said, we might see that there really are no female characters on the good guy or the bad guy team in Back 4 Blood. I'd have to look at the list of people who have been announced. Alright, well. As far as developer commentary, it is getting fewer and further between. I think there is definitely a room for fixing fixing the potential misinterpretation that it might very well be, as far as whether the witch is supposed to be some kind of rape victim or just highly traumatized in some other way, woman, more traumatized than any of the other zombies. By giving her more of a story, although then you also run into the problem, if you give a backstory to the witch character, then you're implying that all the boomers are exactly the one boomer, and all the witches are exactly one witch. And you're implying the same is true for like all the uniquely named characters, a lot more than you would be implying that the individual zombies that we're seeing are the same zombie characters over and over again. See, we can see here in the achievements, there's still several things that you would have to do. And I bet by the time we get to the end of the single player, playing through it once, I bet some of this we will not really have accomplished. We're still very, very far away from the idea of killing 53,595 infected, unless the final scenarios just crack up the number of zombies a lot. Some of these others are pretty skill or luck based as far as achievements otherwise. It would make a lot more sense to write backstory for the 4 main characters, who clearly are the same 4 main characters each time. And if you are going to write a backstory for the boomer or the hunter or the smoker or the witch, any of those characters, then you almost have to have them run away and not die. And certainly that would be a different experience as if the witch just took a certain amount of damage and then she ran off into a corner. It might make a lot more sense if all the main mutant people took a certain amount of damage and ran off into a corner, and that's why you would see them later. Or you could very easily, since the witch is the rarest of the enemies, have her just run away and disappear in a corner, and have her be an actual character, where you give more generic backstories to smokers and hunters and say, these are zombies that have developed the ability to act as hunters or boomers or smokers. Smoker almost writes itself to say, this was a zombie who had a significant amount of lung cancer in them from smoking, or who had a significant amount of just cancerous agents from smoking. You could certainly expand the smoker idea and say that when he releases his smoke gas, he brings corpses back to life and turns them into walking dead zombies. You could certainly have even written a story that said that the zombie apocalypse actually came about through a tainted batch of cigarettes, and so the virus was spread very fast because of that. Although in 2021 it would be almost certainly vapes more than cigarettes. But yeah, that would give his smoke gas a little bit more to do than just make people cough in it when they are in that one specific area. Yeah, when you look at the hair models on these zombies walking in the background of all the male and female characters, you can see that they are very static, not flowing hair, shorter haircuts. Like, they did not have the visual physics and visual RAM budget to have hair flowing around, which is fine. I mean, the only other character you'd probably give any hair physics to would be Zoe, and her hair being tied back makes a lot more tactical sense. It would be a weird game, certainly, if you played a game where you had to constantly move your hair out of your eyesight because you have long flowing hair. That would be almost a funny mini game for about 5 minutes, but it probably wouldn't be worth it to program something like that. But yeah, I would definitely like to know, and they probably did write some kind of webcomic or something that explains the story of Left 4 Dead, but I'd like to know the backstory of all the characters and see that in the actual game. Even if there was a free PDF that was downloadable on Steam, I think most players would not see that and not read it. So it really needs to be on the main menu. Here's the intro video, or here's the motion comic. Motion comics work very well as a cheap way to have a story. Certainly, because this is a multiplayer game, there would have been load times and network connecting times where motion comics or comic book panels playing could have flashed in the foreground, telling you that this is how this all started, along with like game stats or tips and tricks. Anyways, I guess that's going to be it for this recording. Next time we'll start the next level in the next scenario, and this time we'll try real hard to play on easy. Although, if I really was playing that on normal, it wasn't that difficult. I really didn't die after all. It was just slightly more difficult. And I just don't have any desire to really try and play it on expert or anything like that. Survival, looking up there, we can now see, I haven't been paying much attention to the other options. It does say play campaign, play versus, play survival. Survival almost certainly means you can't be revived, and would maybe feel a little bit like Left 4 Dead, but it's probably survival with 4 players online, so it's still probably much more like Left 4 Dead than Resident Evil 4, which was what I was trying to compare it to. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.